So I took some time off. I'm now a take time off evangelist because I am a workaholic. So I'm sure I'm amongst friends. I painted most of my house. The big one was the kitchen. I painted it blue. And the reason why I took time off is because, of course, like all of us, kind of in the movement that wants smaller, more accountable government, that was one doozy of an election. And leading up to it, we had former Prime Minister Trudeau, saying he was going to resign. So I don't know about you guys, but I was kind of running real hot since like January, like working every single weekend. Have you
Yeah.
guys had a chance to kind of recharge your batteries in the last couple of weeks since the big vote?
Not really. I mean, like up into election day, I was not only like working, but also had exams for school. So I was just like being, just worked all the way down to the bone. And after the election, there's still coverage that we need. We have to talk about Carney's cabinet and everything else. So not a lot of rest and recovery. Although compared to what it was during the election, this is comparatively rest and recovery.
You're not working until midnight every single night,
Exactly.
just till
Exactly.
9 p.m. It's fine. Alex, did you get a chance to recharge your batteries?
Yeah, a little bit. It was definitely a disappointing result. I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree with you there. And it was a bit upsetting, but I'm a crime reporter. Crime never stops. It's like the stock market. So on we go.
It's just a very macabre
Yep.
stock market. All right, let's get this thing started. Welcome to Off the Record. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm here with two of my friends. I'm here with Noah and Alex. Um, who wants to kick this off then? Like, as far as, so we were just talking about the election, and I was kind of surprised to see just how many seats changed backsides, to put it nicely, in the last election. More than 100 MPs either lost their seats or didn't seek re-election, and yet they didn't actually change government. Noah, you were saying that's a pretty big shuffle for a lack of a government change.
Yeah, for 110 members of parliament to have like lost their jobs and be shuffled out. The Liberals, they only increased their seat total by about 15-ish, and the Conservatives, they increased their seat total by about 20. So that should really mean that there's only about 50-ish members of parliament who are no longer employed. But a lot of Liberals in the lead up to the federal election, they had planned to resign because Trudeau was just so unpopular. And then not everybody wanted to pull the old Sean Fraser of saying they want to spend more time with their family and then becoming a cabinet minister, one of the most demanding cabinet portfolios in the entire cabinet. So, yeah, that's part of the reason why there's been so many members who no longer are employed and are newcomers to the Commons.
Yeah, Sean Fraser, it looked there for a while there on election night that he was going to lose that Central Nova riding and have to continue spending more time with his family, whether they liked it or not. I think Anita and Ann had pulled the same stunt, and now
Yep.
she's back being a cabinet minister. For folks following along at home, those are all, of course, taxpayer positions. And if you're a cabinet minister in Canada, you're making more than $300,000 per year, plus all sorts of perks. So tons of dough there. On that note, when we've got over 100 MPs that are either lost their seat or not seeking reelection, if they worked for 6 years, they get a pension. And the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we did the calculation. It's going to cost taxpayers about $187 million in pensions. This is factoring in, say, all these MPs live to be 90 years old, and we hope that they do and past that. But it's a big, big price. And for Trudeau himself, he's actually got two pensions. He gets his MP's pension and he gets a prime minister pension. And all told, if he's with us to 90 or past, that's going to cost taxpayers around $6.5 million. I want to know what you guys thought about these very costly pensions.
Well, the good news, the silver lining here is that Justin Trudeau is, as we all know, financially illiterate. So he'll probably lose the money and it'll have a deflationary effect.
He doesn't think about monetary policy, I guess.
I
But
don't
no,
bet at all on high risk pod stocks.
he
He'll-
did,
he'll-
as they say, he came from money before he became a member of parliament. So
but
I
there's
don't
an
think
old
he's
Chinese proverb that wealth only lasts 3 generations, right?
really.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
Maybe we
his
gotta
granddad,
more the
yeah.
Chinese.
Okay, well, that's 3
Well,
generations of
that's
exemptions.
unfortunate for Xavier Trudeau and all of his siblings. So we're waiting to see on that one.
I'm
How
fully
his music
supporting
career
his rap
goes.
career as long as it allows him to avoid a future career in politics.
Oh my
Yeah.
We'll
goodness.
buy every album.
It'll be Prime Minister Trudeau 3.0. Yeah, my daughter's already talking about that here in Alberta.
Oh gosh.
So for anyone who wants to go check out those pensions, it's on the taxpayer.com website, and we do a calculation for every MP. By we, I mean my colleagues in Ottawa did that. Franco Terrazano and a lot of our staff were doing a lot of crunching there for the numbers. So, and again, folks, regardless of party or affiliation, this is all your money. So you need to know where your money's going, and that includes things like pensions. Who wanted to chat about Jamil Jivani? I didn't get a chance to check this out. He apparently had a press conference where he was talking about the foreign worker program. Who wanted to run around with this one?
Yeah, so Jamil Jivani, he's one of the newer members of parliament, and he is lamenting the current temporary foreign workers program for very good reasons. One of them being the high unemployment rate in Ontario, especially for youth. It's at 14%, which is double digits. It's like getting close to Greece numbers. And again, I'm speaking on behalf of a crime reporter. I think one of the most concerning things about high youth unemployment rate is the old adage that the devil makes work for idle hands. What you'll find is if young people don't get work, they'll start committing crimes. And I know that I'm kind of deviating from Jamil Jivani's point. I think that's something that's worth mentioning. And I also think it's interesting. Immigration was really a popular issue amongst people on the political right online and on social media during the election. And it didn't really come up as much as maybe people would have wished. So I also think it's interesting that Jamil Jivani is taking a hammer to this nail now post-election.
And
Yeah,
he grew
and
up working, so Jamil knows what it's like to be bussing tables. So similar to I grew up working in A&W and gas stations and stuff before I became a journalist. So
Yeah, and the
Jamil's got a
prime
really good
minister,
background for that.
the leader of the opposition's wife, worked at McDonald's. And
yeah.
I did too.
Big time, big time. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I would say like the conservative caucus, as you guys mentioned, are people who made up of people who understand the issues of working people, especially after an election campaign where you're on doorsteps pretty much every day, talking to people, asking them what their concerns are. And Jamil says that he heard a lot of his residents talking about immigration. We actually have a clip of him talking about his story, talking to immigrant people in his riding and how they even want less immigration.
I'm canvassing in North Oshawa last year for the by-election where I first got elected, and I meet a gentleman who cannot speak English. Tried to talk to him, but communication barrier just made it hard. And very nice guy though. I see him again a year later in this most recent election, and he knows a little bit more English this time. And you know what he says to me? Too much immigration. And I said, sir, your English is impeccable. Now, he didn't know a lot of words, but he knew enough to get that point across because he knew what he was experiencing and feeling on the ground. You didn't have to be in Canada very long to see that. And that's what I'm trying to get across when I say what it looks like to bring common sense to Parliament.
So interesting to see that Giovanni is continuing that topic. I know, so I worked at the same radio station company as Jamil did back in the day, and he was raising this as an issue of potential concern, especially when it comes to like temporary foreign worker programs and how it's affecting especially youth unemployment. He was on top of this like years ago. Like I'm talking like 10 years ago. So it's interesting that this is one of his first major public statements and that he's trying to take that one on. Where do you see this one going, Noah? Based on what they were saying during the election, do you think this is something that the actual government will be taking seriously and perhaps scale it back a bit?
Well, it remains to be seen. I know that the Carney government and the Liberal platform, it did mention that they would be scaling back at least a little bit some of the high immigration numbers that the Trudeau government had pushed up in recent years, especially during the pandemic. However, the Carney Liberals have only promised to bring down levels to about 2019, 2020 levels. Really, they are suggesting that temporary migration, temporary immigrants should only make up about 2% of the Canadian population at any given point in time. But the Canadian population right now is at 41 million. So that's still a significant amount of people who would be coming here to work temporarily, coming here to take up spaces in Canadian universities and colleges. And at the end of the day, immigration and especially the high levels of temporary migration that we've seen over many years does have many. It does create many problems socially and economically. We've seen the housing crisis, where the average price of a home in Toronto has skyrocketed over $1 million, over $1.3 million in Vancouver, and that's largely driven due to high levels of immigration, permanent immigrants, temporary immigrants who are coming to these big cities to take up jobs and employment, and potentially even take up jobs that Canadians would be able to grasp. For example, Jivani mentioned in his press conference that youth unemployment has gone up over 14%. 14% of young Canadians who are not working means, as Alex has said, there are more idle hands. And there's really no other MP other than Jamil Jivani who knows this best. He wrote a book called Why Young Men, and he talks about why young men turn to certain extremist groups or turn to gang culture or other forms of antisocial behavior and antisocial groups. And one of the big things that it turns young men toward these antisocial behaviors is a dearth of time on their hands, not enough jobs in low skilled occupations for them to then build up their skills and be able to attain higher skilled work. Instead of getting them on that pathway to good employment, instead they're sitting at home with a lot of time on their hands. And it's no wonder that the crime rate, especially in Canada's big cities, has been going up in recent years as the youth unemployment rate has gone up. And as you see, or as Giovanni mentioned, there are a lot of people, temporary foreign workers, who are coming in to fill low wage jobs. I'm actually working on a story now where there was about 58,000 temporary foreign worker permits that were approved just from October 2024 to December 2024. And about 20,000 of those permits were approved for low wage work. Those are low wage jobs that can go to younger Canadians or just newcomers, people who immigrated here, spent years in the process, and need
Mm.
to get on the initial rung in the Canadian employment market, and instead they're being replaced by temporary foreign workers. So it is definitely something that I know Giovanni and other members of parliament heard at the doorsteps. Whether or not they're going to react to it is another question.
I was very surprised even here in Alberta, the so-called youth unemployment rate is high. And that's almost unheard of here because there's usually like energy jobs or ag jobs and stuff like that. That's a very kind of industrious sort of place. So I was quite surprised to see the high numbers of youth unemployment here. So we'll have to see where that goes. I wanted to shift gears here because when I left for my vacation for an entire week, I unplugged. I listened to like old radio shows from like 30 years ago. So I was completely unplugged. When I went to go on vacation and, paint my house and try to recharge my batteries, last I heard, uh US President Donald Trump was a big bad scary man according to Ottawa, and we were trying to buddy up with England in self-defense. Like it was getting to be kind of a ridiculous fever pitch during the election. And then I come back and we're moving in under the Golden Dome. Like, okay, explain this to me like I'm 6. I don't know what this is about. Who was watching the news enough the past week that they can tell me about this?
Right. So earlier this week, President Trump, as he did, made a magnanimous announcement in the Oval Office where he announced this new missile defense system called the Golden Dome. You guys know, Israel, they have something called the Iron Dome, which protects them from rocket fire from Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And the Iron Dome, I don't know if you've seen any of the clips
Yes,
of
I've
the
seen the
Iron Dome
videos. It's
system
amazing.
in work, but it is quite incredible how effective the Iron Dome system is at shooting down enemy rockets and protecting the citizenry. It doesn't have a 100% success rate, but the success rate is high enough to where a lot of Hamas's missiles are just not hitting the civilian population. So Trump sees this amazing missile defense system, and he says, "Well, why don't we create one for the United States and make the United States impervious from incoming rocket fire? And hey, let's also see if we can get Canada under the deal." So he reaches out to Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Carney agrees that yes, we'd like to be included in this new missile defense program. The program is estimated to cost about 175 billion with a B, billion dollars to complete. Congress has said that they're going to allocate at least $25 billion for this project, at least in the upcoming fiscal year. But all in all, $175 billion. And President Trump said that Mark Carney said that the Canadian government would be contributing to developing this missile defense system and helping to pay for this $175 billion system. So it's a bit at odds to what Mark Carney has been saying over the campaign trail or in the past few months, saying that we need to get our elbows up, that we need to reimagine our relationship with the United States. Correct me if I'm wrong, but elbows up is a hockey term where that means that you gotta like start fighting and playing rough. And this doesn't seem like we're necessarily in combat with the United States. It looks like it looks a lot like collaboration. How do you guys feel about Mark Carney's change of tone, especially when it comes to this Golden Dome system?
I will just quickly point out, Alex, that we have unmoney. Like we have unmoney. We are like 1.3
you don't
trillion
have to tell me. I'm aware.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, Alex somehow manages to eke out a living in Vancouver, or just outside of Vancouver, in New Westminster, the original provincial capital of British Columbia, before those islanders stole it from us there in Victoria. Do go on, Alex. I just wanted to point out that we have like no money. Like we don't have money.
No, I'm aware. My previous background is in finance, so I know numbers. And at the risk of sounding like I have Trump derangement syndrome, Trump is really good at saying things and then not doing them. So I think any responsible prime minister of Canada at this point would say, "Sir, not $1 for your Golden Dome until you finish the stupid wall you started at the southern border." like you didn't even finish the last dumb idea that you had, that cost people a small fortune and was never completed. So that's just my opinion. Nobody should be enabling this crazy person and their crazy ideas.
Well, I think you bring up a good point where this is a very expensive project. And, if for people who are into defense policy, that we do have a sort of missile detection system, and we do have anti-air, missiles that just shoot down other missiles.
Called
But
NORAD. Yep.
Yeah, NORAD, and specifically under NORAD's auspices, they have the North Warning System, which does need to be updated because Russia and China.
The size of Canada is 450 times larger than Israel.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
not even including the United States. If this guy can't complete an 18-foot concrete wall across the southern border, what in anybody's mind makes them think that in one term he's going to be capable of creating this golden dome across the entire North American continent?
It's going to take a lot of time, and also we do have the North Warning System, which is at least more cost effective. It's a detection system, to let us know whether being nuked or being hit with some. Yeah, exactly. So we do have other systems, and sure, I think if North America was impervious to incoming missiles, that'd be cool. But at what cost? I think Thomas Sowell put it perfectly. All policy is about trade-offs. You have to think about if we're doing X thing, what are we giving up and why? So is this really a good trade-off? And just zooming out a bit, just on the Canadian political scene, I think it's quite not sinister, but right below that Mark Carney, he told the Canadian public that the United States was an existential threat to Canada's just existence for months on end. He said that we need to redefine our relationship with the United States. He was reaching out to Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron about securing a new defense relationship with them and strengthening those relationships, and specifically even seeking to cancel the contract for the F-35. So there was all these performative gestures before the election, showing that the Carney government wanted to decouple itself, decouple Canada from the United States, and instead we're entering into this new defense project with the United States
Delusion.
that's
It's not a
very
defense
expensive.
project, it's a delusion.
So, do we have to really ask, like, what sort of standard are we holding our politicians to? How much are we going to allow them to say one thing during an election campaign and then govern in a totally different way? And, is Canadians really going to tolerate this? And, are liberal supporters going to, have the wherewithal to look themselves in the mirror and say, we actually voted for a guy who told us one thing and and is doing another, and we're going to vote elsewhere, or just not vote at all for the Liberals. So it's really, I think, concerning. But if the Canadian public is not going to respond, I think that shows something about our democratic culture. But it also shows that Carney's support is stronger than a lot of conservative supporters might hope.
From an experience and money perspective, most of the men in my family were armed forces. I've still got family who are in armed forces. They're guesstimating around a $20,000 personnel deficit right now, meaning they're short. They're saying around that many people, give or take, depends on what perspective you have. That said, like they've got a serious enlistment problem. Like they've got a major issue where people are not wanting to sign up in the armed forces. That's number one. Number two, they waste so much money on dumb procurement things that don't actually help boots on the ground. I forget how much money they wasted on even something as simple as sleeping bags that do not work in the Arctic. Okay? Like these things that, we're in Canada, a big chunk of our country is Arctic. We should have had this kind of figured out by now. So for them to not be able to do that and then just say that they want to perhaps go into what could become a major corporate welfare program with money that we don't have, like we don't have this money. We're more than $1 trillion in debt. In fact, I believe that just as a line item, I don't think it includes procurement, but as a line item for year-to-year expenses, we're spending more now on interest payments on our debt than we do the Department of National Defense as a line
Yeah.
item. I know we spend more on interest than we do for health transfers for, Canada's great healthcare system. So Carney's got to be cautious here. I understand he's kind of in the room with like somebody who's, as you point out, Alex, saying a lot of things. And like party aside, you got to be careful in that situation. You can't just go on having a fight with this person on live TV. Like that's not wise because ultimately it's the working people that pay the price. So if you anger someone like that, you wind up with things like tariffs. You're hurting normal working people on both sides of the Canada-US border. So just something for viewers and listeners to flag that they are talking about a golden dome. And for those of a certain vintage, yes, I know. It does kind of sound like Reagan's Star Wars program. To me, I'm old enough to remember when they were discussing that. So this can kind of become an American military industrial complex kind of make work project. So we'll have to see how much that's actually costing. And hopefully it doesn't cost Canadians that much money while keeping us safe at the same time. Who wants to go for it, Alex?
Sorry, I just wanted to just double down on this point because we were talking about it off air, and it's something that I ruminate a lot right now, and it's probably one of the reasons I needed to take a brief mental health break as well. I think Trump, I've coined this term, I think Trump savior syndrome was an equally poisonous contagion in the last Canadian election to Trump derangement syndrome. Trump savior syndrome, and I see a lot of people suffering from it on the conservative side, one of the symptoms of it is believing in delusional ideas, such as the idea that Donald Trump is going to create an Israel-style missile defense system for an area of land more than 1,000 times greater than Israel in the next 3 years. Again, this person could not complete a simple border wall. Like, the American government is not nearly as competent as people think they are. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I think that Trump savior syndrome is very poisonous contagion in the Canadian political sphere right now.
Can you flesh that out a little bit? Sorry to put you on the spot, but how do you think? So then, do you think that it affected the outcome of the election, like within the conservative movement, or what do you mean exactly?
Absolutely. So the people who suffer from Trump savior syndrome on the conservative side, they were very loud, and there were a lot of influencers who I think suffer from Trump savior syndrome, and it made conservatism incredibly unpalatable to the people that not only had Trump derangement syndrome, but also people who were just, let's call them Trump skeptical. When they were listening to conservative influencers talk about how much they would love to be annexed by the United States and to become the 51st state, and how they think, illogically, in my opinion, that tariffs can stop the fentanyl crisis, much like taxes can change the weather, right? These are Trudeau ideas. Like, Trump, in my opinion, was not traditional conservatism. It was a weird blend of grievance politics and more government, like more taxes. Tariffs are more taxes. Right?
Tariffs are trade taxes. For people who don't understand tariffs, they're just trade taxes. They're import and export trade taxes. Yep.
And so Poilievre, you can criticize him for so many different things, but the one thing you can't criticize him for is his consistency. The reason that he did not like Trump is because he has been consistent on his economic and political views since high school.
Yes,
he liked less taxes, smaller government, and Trump was going in the other direction.
Low inflation. Yep.
But a lot of conservatives, including a lot of conservative media folks, adopted the philosophy that Trump was right, because I think that they suffer from Trump savior syndrome. And I think that this golden dome, people who support it on the conservative side, it's just another symptom of the same disease.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that there's some good insight there. Like, just to just be brief with it. You shouldn't really take at face value from someone that says that Canada is robbing the United States of $200 billion a year, where you can just look up what the trade deficit is, and it's about like 45 billion annually USD, and to think that a trade deficit is highway robbery is that's an interesting interpretation of what a trade deficit is. So take what he says with a massive grain of salt, and if you have high expectations for a big government policy or whatever, you should rely on the traditional conservative belief that government's actually not that great at doing things.
No, government is terrible at doing things.
And I like to think of myself as fairly Trump agnostic, right? Like, I haven't reached the point of saying I wish Kamala Harris was president. I don't think I ever will.
So save the email. Please don't break the inbox for email.
Yeah, like I haven't
got a lot of emails after this, Alex. Like, thanks for additional work.
Well, I know.
Forward them to Alex.
Yeah, it's a very unpopular opinion on the right to dislike Trump, but I believe that Trump savior syndrome, I think it's analogous to the woke right. A lot of people as well who are very, very passionate about Trump. If you criticize him in the least, they'll block you, right? This reminds me of people on the far left. I find it very, very interesting. He's dividing people on the right in very interesting ways.
I'm old enough to have observed politics for a long time, like since the early 80s. And so I understand what it is to admire someone as a person. So someone like Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher, Pope John Paul II, like it's easy to kind of think of them as a person because they are people, but then to start idealizing them. When you start applying that to government, however, this is where I would give people caution. It's all going to come out of your wallet, no matter what. Government is not self-funded. Government does not have its own wealth creation mechanisms. All of this is your money and your kids' money and your kids' opportunities for jobs and your kids' ability to afford a house and your family's ability to fill up your car. So all of that boils down to policy. And that is why, regardless of the human being that is leading the party or the color of the jersey of the party, we need lower taxes, less waste, and accountable, smaller government. If we have those three things in spades, you are more prosperous and you are more free. And you can make your choices about whether or not you like a person, yourself, within your family. And so, to your point exactly, Alex, and to yours as well, Noah, I've worked in government. I've worked outside of government. Government is terrible at doing things. Like, terrible. And I'll use a Jordan Peterson example to illustrate this quickly. I'm sorry I'm going over time. But human beings, think of your own life. Okay? Think about the relationship with your work, your family, your origin, where maybe your ancestors are from, where you're going in the future. An individual is so complicated. Like, so complicated. To be able to balance your own checkbooks or manage your own household or make your own choices, especially with your own kids or something. Like, your own life is so complex as one person. Now imagine being a big government bureaucrat thinking that you should control the decisions and choices and livelihoods of 1 million people? 40 million people? That is a disaster. That is why a government cannot organize a 2-car parade. Okay? Because individuals are infinitely complex. That is why we need, again, low taxes, less waste, and accountable small government so people can seek their fortune and make their own choices and live their lives as they choose to. And to your point, Alex, I would say that is where I would agree a little yellow light of caution when it comes to an individual, of putting all of your eggs in one person's basket, of this person is going to save everything or fix everything. No. Unfortunately, it's up to us. That's what a grassroots movement is about. That's what responsible government and representative government's about. That's why we love things like referendums, why we want town halls, why we want recall legislation. And Noah, to your point on Dr. Soul, I think exactly, and in this case of the Golden Dome thing, ask the 3 questions. Okay, when someone comes up with a great new idea of this is what the big government's going to solve something, okay, compared to what? Okay, that's number 1. At what cost? And what hard data do you have that it will work? I just thought those were brilliant 3 questions that Dr. Soul always asks of anybody who says, hey, I've got this great new idea. Doesn't matter if it's coming from the left or the right. Ask those 3 questions and we'll wind up saving some money. Speaking of money, let's quickly touch on Canada Post. What was the latest there? Did I see 18%? They went 13%?
13.59%.
What's the latest there, Noah? Did you have the details on that?
Yeah, so about on Wednesday, Canada Post announced that it has submitted some a new proposal to QPW. Basically, QPW, they had announced that the 55,000 Canada Post workers would be going on strike. Once again, if you recall, last year, Canada Post went on strike, and the Trudeau government, they actually imposed the same contract on the workers. So now QPW, they're coming back once again to get their vengeance, I guess, on the Canadian government. But as we know, Canada Post, very important, especially for small businesses in Canada who rely on the mail courier to basically conduct all of their affairs. And when Canada Post goes on strike, it really does bring the grind the country to a halt. So it looks as if the 2 parties there are nearing an agreement, but have not reached an agreement yet. So at the end of the day, Canada Post, they are going to have to figure out a way to bring these pay increases for their workers while also remaining solvent. Canada Post, they're in deep debt. They run their program expenses are far greater than the revenue that they're able to bring in, even after the federal government has injected Canada Post with several subsidies. And at the end of the day, many people are thinking that Canada Post won't be able to survive this new collective bargaining agreement. What do you guys think? What does this mean for the future of Canada Post, especially now that they're coming? The workers are set to come back with much larger wage increases.
Well, I think it's just such a funny segue from the last story, because we were talking about Thomas Sowell, and the classic example of government inefficiency is they can't run a post office.
Literally.
And here we are.
And here we are. It's almost like it's true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and we have hard data to prove it as well. Yeah.
And you know, that's a good point. Like I know that the economics writer Matthew Lau has suggested that selling the Canada Post, making it a privately run company instead of a crown corporation, would actually be to the benefit of all Canadians and to, you know, helping Canada Post remain solvent. What do you guys think of that idea? Sell off the Canada Post?
100%. Totally in
Yeah.
favor.
The fewer crown corporations we have, typically the better. Now, I'm going to, you know, offer a little olive branch to folks who, you know, have been smacked on the nose. Like, I don't know, losing the Bay kind of stinks, right? I was happy to see Canadian Tire say that they're going to pick up the colors. Literally, I thought that was kind of cool. So I understand kind of attachment to things like that. And I did a little bit of reading, not the deep dive that I would want to, but I did a little bit of reading on the Royal Mail in the UK, which is again an iconic term, blah, 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 blah. People are used to it. And they were apparently able to right their ship quite well. And my understanding is that they are now largely a private corporation. And they were able to kind of come up with a hybrid theory of fixing stuff. And I believe they're still able to use the term Royal Mail. It's still the same name, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's anything to get out of this where people are still getting a decent wage and the taxpayer isn't worried about being on the hook. Because even though Canada Post is able to operate with its own expenses at a deficit, which isn't great, ultimately it would be the government backstopping it because it's a crown corp. That's the risk. That's the risk to taxpayers. And again, we wind up exactly to your point, Noah, with these strikes, which affect small businesses so much. Like there are so many small businesses, as if they weren't kicked in the teeth enough during lockdowns by the government. They rely on delivery and receive and receipts from Canada Post. So hopefully they're able to resolve this and fix it. They need to figure out a way to fix it. They should at least take a look at what they did in the UK to see if that's something that they could apply here in order to fix the situation. Do we want to wrap up with our bizarre donair story coming out of Vancouver? Alex,
oh, yeah, this is my moment to shine.
I thought you were pulling my leg. So the good news is at the end of the story, we're not making fun of somebody getting hurt. Nobody got hurt.
Yeah. Nobody was physically hurt, which is great. But a man went into a donair store. It's actually just right around the corner from where I live. It's called Paradise Donair. It's on 12th Street. It's actually phenomenal. I highly recommend it. Nice folks that work there. Anyway, a fellow went in with a machete. He threatened the staff, and then he went around the counter and he started slicing donair meat off for himself directly off of the meat skewers, put them into a reusable Walmart bag. Then he moseyed over to the sauce table and was very selective, picked out the Halifax sauce, which came as no surprise to anybody who regularly frequents Paradise Donair. It's pretty bomb. And then he walked out and he was arrested just shortly down the road by New Westminster police, ironically right around the corner from a food bank. So clearly some serious mental health issues going on there. He was released on bail, basically minutes after the offense, maybe a couple of hours at most. And he is back on the street. So
Alex, you're close to the Paradise Donair. Is the Donair actually like that good? Is like the Donair, is the chicken like actually
Put a
like, you
mask
know,
on
out of this
and grab your
world?
big knife.
So
Yeah.
oh man, we're getting really into it. So it has a 4.2 star rating on Google. It's actually not the best place on the block according to Google reviews, but one of the reasons the reviews is lower for Paradise Donair is because apparently the owner is really he's very parsimonious, I guess you could say, with the napkins. He doesn't like giving out napkins, which some people didn't like.
Oh my. Okay.
Says just wash your hands, which I think is, I don't know. It's
Just wash your hands.
it makes it feel more authentic to me. Like I lived in Greece for a little bit, and so like kind of has a Mediterranean feel to just wash your hands.
They just don't have napkins in Greece. That's interesting. I didn't know
I'm
that.
No,
so
you use
glad.
lemons and
I didn't know they're that poor.
I'm so glad everybody was okay. But when you said that he cut the meat into a reusable Walmart bag, like did he put it into like a clamshell first, like a takeout container, or was this just straight into the bag?
they're straight into the bag. It's actually, I guess if I learned one thing from this story, other than like how crazy our criminal justice system is, it's not as easy to slice donair meat as it looked. Like he was really struggling trying to get the meat off of the skewer. Like I think it's like one of those things that like it looks like you could do it on first try, but like it probably takes some practice.
Yeah, I think machetes are meant for, you know, like cutting
Bushes.
unruly hurt bushes, or like, you know, for serial killers, not necessarily for cutting donair meat, but you know.
Well, the weird
thing.
Sorry, go on, keep going.
No, I was gonna be like, maybe Jason should give him some lessons and cutting meat with a machete.
Am I the only one who has used a machete in this conversation for its actual purpose of like cutting underbrush
Oh
to like
Yes.
yeah,
push?
oh yeah, we're
Okay,
boys. Yeah, yeah, we've
okay.
like definitely like hiked through the woods and cut bush for sure.
Like that's what they're typically used for. Well, at the end of the day, I'm glad people are all right. And New Westminster again, hey, full circle. It was the official capital of British Columbia. Is it still nicknamed the Royal City? Isn't that what
It
it was called?
is. It
Yeah,
is. And it's actually a very safe city. Like
it is.
especially this neighborhood. I would say for the most part, this is an outlier.
Yeah, it's a pretty little kind of quaint city. Well, this was very entertaining between donairs and golden domes. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And remember, everything that we've said is thankfully off the record.
Even though it's clearly not.
Ian, talking.
Really? Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. I don't know if I went too far with the Trump savior syndrome. It's my
No, you clearly needed to get that off your chest.
I did.
So, and
It's
I just
my
found it. I did find it politically interesting. Of like, if you found that calculated into the vote or not. So,
I wonder if they have a golden dome that will help us with the new Westminster donair theft problem. Like is it just going to be like a rocket that just like
well the
you
other
know,
the other thing I wanted to talk about with the Golden Dome is I'm like, what, a Golden Dome to stop exactly 0 missiles that have ever been launched at the North American continent? Like,
God
is this a
forbid.
good use of our? Yeah, God forbid, I
Yeah,
suppose, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's like, why spend all of your money on a bulletproof vest in a neighborhood where nobody gets shot?
Right,
Like,
right.
that's
Like,
just so
wouldn't it be
stupid.
better to just make sure you screen people better so you don't wind up with terrorists in your midst? Like, there's all sorts of things you'd
Yeah,
think that'd be better
yeah.
use of
All the
money.
attacks are happening underneath the dome anyway.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
Like,
Like, what's
So, you can have a walled garden, but if you have a serial killer in the midst, like that's not gonna
that's
be
inside
great.
the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. I'm glad I didn't read anything about that and that you just actually surprised me with all of it. That was good. That was great.